9:03 a.m., Tuesday, May 9th. First item on our agenda, Commissioner Majewski is going to update us on the chronic wasting disease in Washington County.
Yes, what this is just a response to Washington County did have a positive test for the chronic waste disease, and there's some things that Texas Parks and Wildlife are doing, and they have a commission coming up to finalize what the plan is for Washington County. Ms. Stephanie Dammer is here today to kind of explain and give you a little overview, a little bit more information on it. Like I said, today is just kind of an update for the court and for everybody to kind of understand what's going on right now and what possibly could be the plans in the future.
Commissioner, would you clarify this is in whitetail deer?
Whitetail, yeah, there's a whitetail positive test in whitetail.
Right, okay.
All right, thank y'all for allowing us to be here. So we do have a positive on March 14th with antemortem testing through a breeding facility. A deer came back positive. So that test was then sent off for postmortem testing at a national laboratory in Iowa. That sample as well came back positive, which kind of setting forth our department to put in a surveillance zone. So there is a proposed surveillance zone that will go before the commission, TPWD commission, the end of May. This proposed surveillance zone is 2 miles, and within that zone, we'll ask that any deer harvested in that area be required to submit tissue samples. So in your document that I've got for you, the proposed zone is the map on the front. All right, so if we go to page 2, how we have handled this in the past, Hondo, Uvalde, we have either drop box locations or manned check stations. We are opting for a drop box location. It's an advertised location that's easy for hunters to find. It's available 24 hours a day, but this is a location where those hunters can drop off the head samples in a freezer, and then biologists or interns come and process those samples. All right, we're trying to make this as easy as possible for those hunters that are required to submit these samples. We have found that these drop box locations are not only utilized by those in the 2 mile area, but by hunters in the surrounding, all of Washington County potentially, and maybe even beyond Washington County. So it's likely to increase samples quite a bit. Not really any need to man it. We'll plan on having 2 interns that are working part-time Friday, Saturday, Sunday, holidays. I will assist as well. Let's see. So the drop box location allows the flexibility. What we are requesting or asking for is an area from the county, potentially that is level surface, has electricity, that is easily accessible by hunters wishing to drop off a sample. I've outlined a couple of areas on a map, page 4 of the document. There's 2 on the fairgrounds, and then there's 1 location, probably the most preferred location at the constable's headquarters, just before you go into the chain link yard. But like I said, we need level surface, an area that we could keep open the last week in September through the end of general season, which is mid-January. An area that can accommodate several vehicles. So examples of the locations, they're not permanent. We will tear down everything that we put up. But you can see several different examples on page 3. The 2 on the bottom are check stations that are manned. Again, we're asking for an unmanned location. where the part-time interns will go back and forth and check the freezer and make sure we're staying on top of it.
Ms. Downright, when you, for the non-hunters and people who are not familiar with this situation, explain the sample. What is it?
Okay, so what we are collecting to test for chronic wasting disease, we are taking the retropharyngeal lymph nodes. If it is a deer that is potentially diseased, showing signs of disease, or what we call a clinical deer, we will also take the obex, which is part of the spinal column.
So would you, if I was a hunter, would I leave the entire head in the freezer then? Is that what I would do?
So we'll have instructions on how to take those. We do plan to host a public hearing roughly around August to get this information out there. We will hold trainings so that hunters know how to collect these samples. If the hunter is not comfortable in doing so, they can just cut the head off at the neck and then we'll collect the sample.
Okay.
Try to make it as easy as possible on the hunters.
Right. Good. Well, it's unfortunate that we did, but we've been without a case. Of course, are there any cases in our surrounding counties?
Good morning. I'm Ryan Shaneberg. I'm with the Big Game Program, and CWD is kind of my baby. That's what I handle 180% of the day. So Stephanie asked me to come and help answer some of these questions if she got if needed some help. So the answer to your question is there any CWD surrounding us, and there is not. Wanted to, a while ago you asked something about the clarification in the white-tailed deer. So just for edification, I want to back up and describe what CWD is. So maybe just start at the beginning, give a little CWD 101. So CWD is a prion disease. So in the world of diseases, CWD is new. It's not a virus. It's not a fungus, it's not a bacteria, so it's something that we can't kill. So that's the reason that right now we're at one case in Washington County, and right now that doesn't sound like a big deal when he's like, well, in one, yeah, it's not a big deal. But it's when you have a disease that once it gets established, you can't get rid of, your reaction to it needs to be pretty swift. And so that's what we're looking at is how do we get pretty swift and make sure it doesn't get established in an area. And that's what we're trying to do right now is see is CWD outside the area that we already know it's at, and then we'll go into that area and say, is it established there? So that's what our goal here is. So I got ahead of myself here. So CWD is a prion disease. A prion is just a protein that misfolds. When it goes up against another prion, it causes it to also misfold. And as it replicates in the body, then those prions will then start to get up into the brain and cause neurological issues. And so the animal will start to drink excessively, forget to eat, basically causes pockets in the brain, so it causes neurological dysfunctions. The problem with this disease is it takes so long. And so, in our world of where you can have a hamburger in about 3 minutes, a disease that takes 2 to 4 years for incubation, our patience for seeing this and seeing it through is pretty small. So right now, we don't know where in the disease, what stage of the disease we're in. We hope that it's brand new. We hope that we don't have environmental contamination. And so by that meaning that once the environment gets contaminated, a prion, once it's in the environment, you can't get rid of it. So we hope to get swift on this disease and remove the animals out of the environment, or remove them from the area before they have environmental contamination. Sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place here. So the only animals that are affected by this are your cervids. So far, humans and livestock aren't affected by it, which is great news. But we caution people to, if people are worried about it, have tests, and that's what these drop boxes are there for. So if people harvest an animal and are saying, mad cow disease was the first cousin for CWD, and didn't affect people till all of a sudden it did. And so there are some people that got sick from the first cousin of it. And so we want to make sure we offer people that opportunity to have their animals tested. We've been testing. Last year around the state, we tested 17,000. The year before that, we tested 14,000. So our testing is ramping up, tracking the disease, following zones like this. These drop boxes are a way that we can increase our ability to meet the need for these landowners. We can't be everywhere at once. You know, a hunter shoots a deer on Christmas night. Stephanie's obviously not working, so how do they get that deer dropped off on their way back to Houston to go to their Christmas the next day? They can use these drop boxes for getting that animal sampled. They can still go in it. We have these tests. We'll come by the next morning. We collect the sample. We get it shipped to the lab. The lab takes about 2 weeks to get the test results back, and then we post those. When they get their sample dropped off, there's a little number that they pick up, and then we post those test results online. Then they can check those periodically. As soon as we get test results, those numbers post, and then they can know, yes, my animal was not detected. If it's positive, I promise they'll get a call, but they can have that confidence when their animal is done being tested. Sorry, I just threw a lot of information at you and a lot of different.
I've got a question.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
is this the first ever case in Washington County?
It is, that we know
Okay.
of.
And how long have we been, and again, for my own edification, because this is new to me, how long have we been testing in Washington County?
Well, it's the first test we did were about 2002.
Okay.
And so, but those were testing hunter harvest and roadkills and things like that. Our testing has been ramping up significantly since. 2012, our testing ramped up significantly. Back in 2002, we were doing about 1,000 tests a year statewide, so not a whole lot. 2012 is when we found CWD in West Texas, so we're like, hey, we need to get a little more serious about this. 2015 is when our sampling, we found a positive in a breeding facility. And just by the nature of how breeding facilities work, their business practices are to buy and sell and trade deer and ship them out to other ranches. And so there's a lot of movement in that. And so following
Was
that.
that the Ox Ranch?
No, that was not.
That was a different one?
It was a different one. yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So just to clarify, last year, on average, I collected roughly 110 samples. Mind you, that's between Waller and Washington counties, but I would say 95% of those are coming from Washington County, between roadkills and hunter harvest.
Okay. And what
I currently work.
predicated that? Was there just concern by the hunters, or were they just aware of the program, or?
So we have what predicated the numbers of samples increasing?
yeah.
Because of our risk is increasing, our concern about CWD and where it's at, and we need to know what our risk is in certain areas. And so we have a risk matrix that we would design to be able to say, okay, according to the risk in this area, we need to collect this many samples over there to have a statistical confidence that the disease is not there. In these breeding facilities, they were required to antemortem test or postmortem test all their mortalities. And that's how this positive was detected. They were collecting antemortem tests prior to shipping out to release. And that's
I
why
see.
they found this positive. Antemortem meaning they tested before
Before
it was while it was still alive, before it went to release, so a rectal biopsy. It's a less sensitive test, which means that it's pretty far along in the disease progression, but means that we did catch it prior to going somewhere else and infecting that area, so it did do its job there. But yeah, so the bottom line is we did have some tests in Washington County, so we do have some confidence that it's not rampant around the county or around the state. Like I said, we collected 17,000 samples statewide, and if you're interested, we can give you a map of where samples are, and what our statistical confidences are, in the county, and what we've done historically year after year after year. But Washington County historically has been a pretty low risk county, and so the sampling has not needed to be higher until now. But now, because of this positive here.
At the breeding facility?
Right.
Okay.
And so what we'll do is we've got a push pin there, and we'll draw a circle around that and say, we need to make sure that disease hasn't escaped from that area. and sample extremely intensively around that. But intensively, from what I understand from Stephanie, this is a prairie with very low deer density, so
Okay.
how intensive can you get where there is no hunting pressure and not a
Just-
lot of,
yeah.
and not a lot of deer?
So, just for reference, I pulled 8 samples from what would be this 2-mile zone last year. And the bulk of those were either on 50 or 105. So, it's a relatively low sample size for that area.
So now that they have found an active, case on that breeding facility, what does that look like? I mean, and I don't know if this is created by statute, do they have to test every single animal, or is it just kind of like random, or how does that work?
Well, so they're already required to test every single animal. Every
single one.
animal that dies in every breeding facility has to be tested. That's already a requirement for all breeding facilities everywhere.
Yeah.
And how
so-
long has that been going on?
I don't know, several years.
Yeah.
And so prior to that, there was a smaller percentage, and it's been, as risk has increased, it's been going up.
And so how contagious is this? If it's very contagious,
It's-
mildly contagious, we've had all kinds of fear.
Right.
Fear can create people to make wrong decisions. And first off, you have 3 proposed sites. All of them are around an agricultural area where a lot of animals go. It's a fairgrounds.
Right.
So my concern is, as a county commissioner, if something were to happen, that this spreads, and like you said, mad cow was not a problem until it was a problem, until it morphed into something else. So this commissioner's court would then put that on those grounds, and then we're gonna be the ones that are gonna be blamed for it. At the end of the day, I've watched a video about this, and there's people spraying their whole equipment down, their boots. I mean, it has gotten to where I'm a little concerned about us putting this in that location. I'm not saying that this commissioner's court shouldn't help, but at the end of the day, I don't think you guys know what could happen with this disease, if it could morph into something else. There's not enough data.
Absolutely.
Just like we didn't have enough data about COVID. We made poor decisions in that. We could make poor decisions here. And that would be detrimental to this commissioner's court and to this county. I think we need to take some time and figure out what would be the best location
Well, and
to
ideally,
isolate
that first
anything.
location across from the fairgrounds was the first ideal location.
And you
Well,
make some
that
fair
was-
points, and these are just proposed. We can look at anything else. These are just some ideas that Stephanie had, and so these are
They're-
none of these
You're
are.
talking about the one at the constable's office?
There's
So
a lot
do you
of-
only need one, or do
Yes.
you need multiple?
One location.
So the
Okay.
idea behind a Dropbox is we just have to have something that people will have access to. A Dropbox is mainly just a freezer. So just picture an ice chest freezer. Somebody's going to drive up to. We've got a overhead carport just to have shade on it to keep shade on the freezer. There's a more or less some trash bags there. They put a head in a trash bag, put it in the freezer. So we're not going to have site contamination there. So I absolutely take every point you have there and take those to heart.
And the thing
completely
is that if
understand
it's
those.
spread through people walking in through, a deer hunter is maybe not gonna say, oh, let me check my shoes before I go drop this off. So you could contaminate an area wherever they go. My point is that it kind of sounds like if this is such a widely spreadable phenomenon or disease, then we need to be very cautious about who we let on the county property with whatever they're carrying, because they could drive, it could be on their truck, correct?
True. And so, I mean,
It can't?
No?
And there's no proof to show that that's ever been.
There's a lot of controversy surrounding this.
there's
It
so
depends
many
it depends on who you
conspiracy
talk to.
theories and everything else. I mean,
So it's
Let
like
me ask you a
COVID.
question here, if I may.
So it's like COVID.
Has there been a case in what I call wild deer, not farm deer? Has there
Yeah,
been
that's a good
a case
question.
in the state of Texas in the wild herd?
yes, we have wild deer with CWD.
And where was that?
We have several. West Texas and the Panhandle are the two biggest ones. We've got them in Medina County and in Del Rio.
So is the current solution to kill the deer that have it?
That is the only way to get rid of it.
So if a deer is in contact with another deer that's had it, you kill all those deer, like in this farm?
That is the only way to know. So the only definitive tests, actually there is no definitive test. There is no 100% test. Every test you get, test results back say not detected. And so there is no, even if you kill the deer, you can't say, yes, this deer had it, or you know it for sure that it had it if it comes back positive. If you don't know that it didn't.
But if it
have
comes back negative, you don't have to kill any of those deer, even
No.
if they're in that surveillance zone? Or do you have to?
Well, so our purpose of the surveillance zone is just to know what else is happening in and around this facility. If CWD was, so there's two theories here. Did CWD come in from the outside into that
Into it,
facility?
or the other way
Or
around?
was it in this facility and has it escaped outside? So that's what we're trying to do. It's trying to get as many samples to have some statistical confidence of what is happening around this area. That's what that purpose, that 2 mile circle, if you look at that, that's what we're doing, is just saying, okay, just draw a 2 mile circle. The reason for 2 miles is to, CWD, basically in other states, has shown that if you're gonna find it, you're gonna find it within that 2 mile radius, initially. And so that's what we're using, is that 2 mile radius. So we're gonna look there very intensively. If you don't find it there, you're not gonna find it, within reasonable confidence. And so that's what we're trying to do, is if we can get that statistical confidence. And the problem is that deer density is very low there. And so we don't know
So that's
how many samples it's gonna take. And so
Well,
we'll have
so-
to rerun those models.
So when did the disease, when would they start testing? You said 2002 was the first?
That's when we first really started testing it.
And what was, I mean, how did they discover it, or what did they do? Because the thing is, has it always been there? Is it something that's always, a deer dies, somebody sees it on the side of the road or whatever, they assume it got hit by a car? And
Yeah.
until we started looking for it, is it something that's been around?
We
or
did
is it-
detect our first
Since the
positive.
60s, apparently.
Yeah, the 60s is when they found it in Colorado, 1967 in Colorado, and that was in a research lab in Colorado is when they recognized it there.
So-
And so we found our first positive in 2012 when New Mexico found a positive 1.5 miles from our border, and it's like, if you found it 1.5 miles from your border, you probably have it in Texas. So we went out and shot a few deer on our side of the border in El Paso and found it on our side of the border too. Go figure, right? And so now we have it way out there.
So
But-
are they finding more of the spread? I mean, and again, I'm asking because I'm not educated about this. Are they finding, or is there any data that suggests that it's more from just like the natural migration as opposed to like the breeding and then the relocation of the deer? Or, I mean, obviously it could be either or, but I'm just wondering if there's one or the other that's potentially, creating more of a spread.
Well, so the deer, like in Washington County, aren't going to migrate. It's not like the elk herds in other states that move back and forth. These
Right.
are local deer that stay in a very localized area. So the movement comes through
The
two
breeding.
parts. Through carcass parts, and that's something else we're looking at very clearly. If you go to Oklahoma or to Colorado and shoot a big elk and you bring the head back and boil it out in your backyard or throw the carcass parts out in your backyard, that can transmit these prions, or through moving live animals, whether it's in a breeding facility or you have a ranch and you release animals. So those are the two ways that CWD is most likely to spread.
So and again, I'm just lost. I'm trying to put the pieces
Is-
together.
My question is it a genetic disease, or is it, if it's not a virus, it's not a bacteria, if it's not that, is it something that the animals are, you're
Predisposed.
you're genetically prone to have it, and
Susceptible.
certain,
So all animals can get it. So every deer that gets it will die from it. It's 100% susceptibility and 100% mortality from it. So every animal can get it and will die from it. There is a genetic component. So there is some animals that have a pregenetic disposition to die a little bit slower. And so if they have that genetic component, when they get it, they don't replicate those prions as fast, and therefore they die from something else before they get it. Which brings up another good point. Most animals don't die of CWD, and that's another big misnomer out there. There's been some people
They die
that-
with.
that Yeah, I mean, it's just like saying, you know, if you jump off the top of this very tall building, you don't die from jumping off the top of the building, you die from hitting the ground. You don't die from CWD, you die from losing cognitive function and stumbling out on the road and getting hit by a car. That's why we test roadkills. Roadkills are 3 times more likely to find CWD in roadkills because they're losing cognitive function and they don't judge the speed of that Ford coming at them. Or they aren't swallowing properly, and so they get aspiration pneumonia. So there's been this big push saying that deer don't die from CWD. This is not a big deal. It just puts them in a place to die a lot easier. And that's one reason we're worried about it, is because we don't want to have these population problems.
So are there
with it.
different things that like Hunter, and the reason why I ask is because my parents' property is like just barely outside of this 2-mile radius. So, you know, my husband, my brother-in-laws, you know, they all hunt out there. Is there something that they need to be looking for, or you know, if they shoot a deer, do they need to just automatically assume that they need to bring in a sample, or how does that work?
Best advice I could give you is if you see any animals anywhere, if you see an animal that's clinically ill, so any animal that's droopy ears, emaciated, it's an animal that just doesn't look healthy. Anywhere in the county, anywhere in the state, if you're hunting and you see an animal that doesn't look healthy, call the biologist, get it tested. That's just good practice, and so that's just, you know, disease management 101. If you're hunting in an area, especially close to a zone, then what I'd recommend there, because we are trying to get as many samples from that area, while it's not as valuable because we're just outside the zone, but we still would love to get as many samples from that area as possible. So every single sample, call Stephanie, call the technicians that are going to be helping out, go by the drop box, bring those samples in, because we're going to be sampling as much as we can for that area. It will help us learn a lot about those. So if they shoot 5 deer, bring all 5 of them in, and it's going to help us learn a lot about what's happening.
It's 5
I'm
minutes.
Just the
sorry,
head.
I have a question. This
Yeah.
is from the county attorney's office. How do we enforce that?
We're not.
It's not an enforcement. And so this, every
So
sample
it's just
is,
if we shoot this deer and we feel like bringing it to the drop box, we will?
yes, there's,
It's not on our system.
it is.
So there's no mechanism in your code for somebody to write a ticket or anything like that if they've been hunting in the zone and didn't?
So we do have laws, and that's the game warden.
Yeah.
To enforce, and if they leave the zone without, I mean, it's just like not tagging a deer. If they
Yeah.
leave their property and haven't tagged the deer, you can write them a ticket. If they leave the zone and haven't gone and got it sampled, same citation.
There's carcass movement and testing restrictions or requirements within the zone.
Okay.
But like her family, if outside the zone, it would just be voluntary.
Voluntary.
It's literally like,
Right.
It's 5 minutes
Across the creek.
to submit a sample. That's about how long it takes me to take that sample out, and then we submit that to TV, DML, and College Station. You get the sample back, or at least the results, and you have peace of mind that that deer is not infected. It's
Did-
5 minutes.
Do they have the ability, so say there is a deer in this zone, will you be able to trace it back to say, hey, it was exposed to this?
If the animal had a tag or a tattoo, then yes.
Okay,
Otherwise, then no.
so that being said, I know you said that these are local deer in Washington County. It's not, they don't migrate. Correct me if I'm wrong, the Texas Parks and Wildlife, I don't know how long ago that was, where they dropped deer off in Washington County?
Yeah.
Were those tested before?
That
If we
was-
knew,
If we had known about CWD back in those days, I'd
well,
have to
if
go
it
back
was,
and look
that
at
wasn't in the
was.
sixties, I know that, that's when it was first.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the
used to early
60s when it
90s.
got-
But if those deer did have it and they'd been on the landscape this long, the prevalence of that CWD would have spread, and we would be picking it up on the roadkill
Right.
and the
With
hunter
her testing
harvest.
she's already done, we would have known about
Which is
this
correct, is what
long
I'm
before.
saying, is I hate the way they compare it to mad cow disease, because mad cow disease was a horrible scare for everybody. It turned
Right.
out to be, in my mind, don't even hear about it anymore.
Yeah.
And so here we're going back to the same thing, and deer is scaring the hell out of
Yeah.
people.
And so,
And-
and I'm glad you brought that up, because my hope is what we can do is we can slow down the spread enough, and the reason we don't hear about mad cow disease is we figured out how to stop it. And the trick was, quit feeding cows back to cows. The way the mad cow disease spread was, you got a cow that's worth nothing, I can't feed it to people in hamburgers because it's sick. And so what they were doing is grinding it up and putting it back into cattle feeds. So when they banned mammalian protein in cattle feed, then mad cow disease went away. And so I'm keep waiting for us to find that silver bullet in CWD. Wait us for like the screwworms used to be a big deal until all of a sudden we figured out how do you eradicate it. Keep waiting us to find the magic fairy dust to get rid of CWD.
Right.
Whatever that is, we haven't found yet. I mean, it's still too new.
Right, right.
But our scientists are working on it, and
Yeah.
so eventually they will get there. But right now we're not. So the goal is to slow down the spread of it, so that when we do have to treat it, we're treating it in a small area instead of
Yeah.
254 counties all across
And so
the landscape.
when you said you did, what, 17,000 tests over the state last year?
Yes.
Any idea how many were positive?
Well, so total statewide, we're only up to 490 something positive total statewide. So
Right.
last year out of the 17,000.
Last year?
No, that's total.
Total.
Total ever.
Yeah.
So,
Total ever. Yeah. So I mean, but it doesn't. And that's like what I said a while ago. Is we only have one in Washington
Yeah.
County. But when you say total ever, well, we're talking about a disease that once you get in an area, once it gets rooting in an environment,
But
it
didn't you
will
say there was a
only
genetic
increase.
component? Maybe is there a I mean, are they doing any testing where they can test to see if they're genetically susceptible to this?
The science on this genetic stuff is still very new. I mean, it's still up and coming. And so, but the animals, as far as we know, the genetic component, they still get it. They still die from it. They just die slower, as far as we know.
and there's no cases now where it's been passed through to a human through eating deer meat.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if it tests positive?
Even if it tests positive, we have one of the researchers
That's good
that
to know.
yeah,
That's right.
who knowingly ate a CWD
That's
positive.
good to know, everyone.
And he's like, and I look fine.
Yeah.
I would never eat any animal that doesn't look healthy for
And-
anything.
And that is, and,
Right.
and the point of the matter is, your deer hunters, if they get in there and they start cleaning the deer and they notice the meat, something doesn't look right, the deer wasn't right.
Yeah.
It's, hey, get rid of the meat, we don't
We
take it.
cleaned one the other year and it had a lung infection. Like, if it's got a lung infection, that's probably an infection that's systemic in the meat. Called the game warden, sent him a picture. He's like, yep, I wouldn't eat it. We got
Yeah.
approval and discarded it. Nothing to do with CWD, but if the animal's not healthy, don't eat it, irrespective of CWD.
Okay.
But absolutely, take home message is CWD has not ever knowingly harmed people. But the human equivalent, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, has an incubation period of about 30 years, so we're 30 years out from this outbreak. So, but we don't know what we don't know.
Right, it's
We
a
don't-
it's a precautionary,
Yeah,
trying to do the
and
best.
So
Just-
that's why we're testing deer.
So-
So if you're worried about it, test it, and you'll get your test results back in about 2 weeks. And
So you test a deer if you have a facility, you test a deer, it tests positive, you have 300 deer there, you guys go and eradicate those deer, in other words, kill them all and bury them, correct?
not necessarily. They
Okay.
get options.
What are the options?
They have the option to do research on them, and there's facilities to do like this genetic testing that we've kind of danced around. So there is a facility that is working on a research project with it. But the surest way to make sure that the facility is not contaminating more is the eradication that you're talking about. That the research is expensive, and most of them choose not to go that route because of that expense.
So who pays for all those deer? Because in a facility, they're charging people for those deer.
Right.
Those deer are their livelihood.
Right.
So who pays for that? Does the facility have to just lose that? That's their loss?
They can apply for indemnity, and that's through the feds, through USDA, and depending on, they can whether get approved or denied for that.
That's an agricultural question. That's not
Yeah.
just for deer.
Yeah.
That's in
Right.
every species that there's government regulations that they, like you said, unfunded, that every form of agriculture has to deal with and it's not, there's people out there providing, your farmers, your ranchers, and they're doing everything they can, and like you said, those people in the deer facility care about their deer just like the people that care about their cows or chickens, anything to produce livestock. That's their livelihood. So it's not anything that is a negligence on their end of it.
Right.
You know, it's there. And,
Right.
you know, and then they definitely do not get compensated accordingly for what, no matter what branch of agriculture it's in.
That's what I was thinking.
Will anybody else have any other questions for these folks? Thank y'all for coming and
No.
explaining this to us.
I do
this
think
morning.
we need to revisit the fact of where we're gonna put this facility.
Yeah.
And that was a proposed site, like I said.
Yeah,
I
again,
think we need to look
The
at that real
commission, the
seriously.
commission doesn't.
Y'all
need
got
to-
better ideas on where and when? I mean, the proposal that Stephanie put forth is just a,
Strictly proposal.
yeah, we need a place to put up a freezer, has electricity, has a place we can put a carport, that people can come by at any hour of the day or night from that September through mid-January timeframe. Drop off a head. If there's concerns about this place, if there's concerns about whether it's safety, cars pulling out on roads, if there's concerns about people
Well, if y'all
vandalizing
have-
the drop boxes.
We'll get together on that and come
So,
up with some
but-
other alternatives
But,
if
yeah,
one of
we
these is
appreciate
not
y'all's
workable.
willingness just to
Yeah.
entertain the idea. I
Well, if
completely.
y'all
I
have any
think we wanna-
significant updates, one way or the other,
Yes.
Right.
will you please let us know? Because obviously I care because of where this is
Right,
located.
and I would encourage you to, if they harvest a deer, submit samples.
Well, this
Okay,
court
thank
wants to
you.
cooperate and see what we can do to assist in getting this done. So we'll have to get our heads together and get with Stephanie and see what we can come up with here. If this site is not suitable, see what else is suitable, okay?
Mr. Amel, did you still have a question, or was it answered? Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, he didn't hold his hand up anymore.
In my rambling, I answered.
Appreciate it,
Well,
Ryan.
thank y'all so
Thank
much.
you,
Thank you
Okay,
for coming in.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item number 2, Commissioner Hanneth has been working on some projects here. The first 2 on here is a BISD PD update and reunification plan update, somewhat intermingled. So you want to discuss those?
Sure. So first of all, Commissioners, I think what we decided was that there was an election held. There are new board members. I think it's an opportunity for the school now to figure out how they're going to manage this, and with these new board members, there may be some changes in what their decisions are. So I think once we hear back from them, I think they're going to be sworn in on Monday. So it's not that much more time to wait. In the meantime, we can talk and chew gum. So we've been working on the reunification program and our policy MOU.
Yeah.
And we had a meeting last week, and it went really well. I think there was a lot of valuable points brought up. And of course, you all know that the reunification plan that the school district is looking at that involves the county would be the expo grounds. And we gave them some pictures of what it was like when we did the
Sub-hub.
the sub-hub, so they kind of saw how traffic moved in and out and how we can manage that traffic. So, very good meeting. I think that we've set up a shared file for all that information to be shared amongst those members. And we've included Mr. Williams in on those conversations because he's going to be handling the stuff at the expo. So, I think it went really well. The DSE solar generator for the expo, we talked about that, and we had a meeting also last week, and we sat down with them to see to look at our plans, to see what the electrical load was, and allowed them an opportunity to look at the facilities. They did a walkthrough. They're going to get back with us with some proposals and some numbers that we can maybe then bring back to the court.
Is this something that is anticipated to use ARPA or reserve, or what are your thoughts?
Actually, currently, it's just to see if a solar
Is
how a solar
actually-
generator
If
works.
it's feasible.
If
Yeah,
it's even an option?
It's basically a
Okay.
feasibility test.
There
for us.
has
Okay.
been any kind of
Gotcha.
discussion about cost or that. So
The next
Okay.
thing is the storage building. We have a planned trip. I had spoke to Ms. Rothermel and Commissioner Bullock. I may have to be out of town, so I've asked Commissioner Majewski to go on that trip. You guys all
We're
know.
doing that on Friday.
Yes, this Friday. So you guys all know that that is something that we need to get those files out of the jail, and so that we can then remodel the jail kitchen. So, and of course, we're working in tandem with that and the jail kitchen RFQ. So we finished the RFQ. It's going to be in the judge's office. We will put that on next week's agenda. Commissioner Bullock and I have been working on that So that should be good to go next
to
week,
go.
and we'll have it on the agenda. And the last thing is the landscaping project out here. There's some things that we've noted about the grounds, and we're going to be working on an RFQ for that, so that we can get someone in to give us an idea of what that's going to look like in terms of changing that. We've Texas, the AgriLife folks have sent someone out from, I believe it's the Forest Service, is that correct? To look at
Texas
the
Forest
trees.
Service, I
The
think,
trees, yeah.
Yeah, to check the trees. We want to make sure all the trees are not dying and have a disease, so that if that needs to be part of the RFQ, we put it in there. So,
And the RFQ will be out quickly.
yeah, we're gonna be working on that as quick as we can, because we have, with what we found out with the jail kitchen, they're pretty generic, so we can utilize those because they're basically for services. So are there any questions about those projects, because those are all gonna be coming your way? I just kinda wanna let y'all know where everything's at.
Thank you.
Oh, I think we might want to clarify, because I know that there has, been some discussion about, regarding the landscaping and drainage RFQ for the courthouse, as to whether or not the court, depending on the cost, wants to utilize reserve funds or ARPA. And my understanding was that we were going to follow ARPA protocol, but then down the line, if the court so chooses to utilize a different source of revenue, we've got that option.
Well, and the reason we do that is because we like options, right? We tell everybody who comes to budget that don't just give us one option, give us more than one sometimes, especially when it's these kinds of projects. So I think it's better to have options like that, especially since we don't know what those costs are going to be for the jail kitchen and some of those other things, some of those other projects that we had scheduled for ARPA. So that's kind of what the mindset is there.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
Do you have anything else, Commissioner?
Nope, I do not.
Other question, has the court continually reset the expectations with the school district about the cost specifically related to dispatch if we choose to partner with the county in that endeavor? Because that is something that they continually have struggled with, and we need clarity. And so has there been clarity about what the cost expectations are on you guys' end?
I can answer that. There's a meeting proposed for this Thursday for the people who are involved with the dispatch.
Right.
And they're going to go through and see where we are and what we would have to add and what those costs would be.
Okay.
So this is, and it's not an open meeting, it's just for that committee. And they will be reporting back to the court.
Cool. Thank you very much.
You're
I can
quite
tell you,
welcome.
Archer, that Commissioner Majewski and I, what was that, 2 weeks ago? We met with Dr. Chaplin, and we shared some of the information that we had at that time
Right.
regarding the expenses associated with that.
Okay, great.
So,
It is moving forward. It's just, things move a little slower than we'd like sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'm making a motion to adjourn.
Motion been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.